that's worked quite well. But we're planning to live stream again at Easter Sunday. But it's the ongoing thing, really, in terms of we're not a massive church. We get about 120 on a Sunday morning. We have picked up new watchers of our YouTube service during the last 12 months from all over the country, really. Not of the scale as from like Swan Bank, but that's been positive. So, but it's that balance for me, it's that balance of having a solution that's easy to use when, like many places, we're already short of tech volunteers. I'm just about done with 60 seconds.
Yeah, there you go. Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Anybody else like to share a little bit about where they're coming from, what they're doing in the church? Isabel, go for it. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'll go for it. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and John. We're based in Penrith, in Carlisle. We're part of the New Frontiers group of churches, and we have been meeting primarily through Zoom during lockdown. So we haven't actually yet gone as far as streaming our services because we're very interactive. But you know, we're looking at the possibilities going forward now that we're using more technology, that maybe there'll be particular services, you know, where we want to reach out, that we'd like to use streaming as a means of doing that. So yeah, so it's just, you know, working out what we can manage really with a very, very small tech team. And we're just sharing a building with URC actually. So, you know, it's knowing what we can do with what's available really.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Anybody else fancy sharing a little bit? Yeah. Craig, over to you.
I'm Craig. I'm a worship leader in a small Anglican church in Gloucestershire. We've got 7 churches and 1 rector. We've just got to interreg them. At the moment, we've been doing all our worship on Zoom, and it's worked really well. We've actually got a larger congregation on Zoom than we did in reality. So as we go back into churches, we want to see how we can keep the online community going as well as the real services. So that's what we're hoping to do.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Robin, so you got your hand raised there.
Hi, yeah, so I am the audiovisual team leader for the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Cheltenham. Like many of you, we've been on Zoom since the beginning of lockdown. For us, it's been a little bit more forced because we don't have our own building, but there are hopes that we'll be able to find somewhere to meet again as the restrictions lift. We have been doing a little bit of live streaming of our Zoom services using the functions built into Zoom. I've also been doing my own personal music live stream, and so I think the church wants to be able to stream services when we get back to meeting together, because likely that some people will be ready to come back to physical services before others are, and they want to kind of maintain that togetherness, I think.
Yeah, well, that's great. And it's a big challenge for a lot of people, isn't it, when they go back, how they're going to incorporate both elements of worship, both in an in-person thing and online. And it's very personal, but because you have to find the way that matches your congregation, but it's also very technical. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Roger, so you've got your hand up.
Yes, we're just a small Methodist church, part of a very large circuit, and we're divided into sections where we are, mainly geographical, but one of our ministers goes right the way across, or the super goes, in 3 churches which are equally spread the whole width of the circuit. At the moment we just do Zoom services in our part of the circuit, and that works as far as it can, but as I say, you can't congregationally sing or anything like that on Zoom, and the sound and mix of stuff that you do when you share screen is also a bit complicated. And if you want to do it between other people across the contributors, it gets even more so, and you start getting time delays and problems knocking each other off the spot.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Is there anybody else at this point who'd like to share anything? Just having a look. Carl.
Hello. Yes, sorry, not very tech savvy. My son is, which I'm lucky about. So we've been doing onto Facebook, going live onto Facebook. For a start, we was using CCTV cameras into a CCTV camera box and switching it that way through cameras. So very simple. And now we're going on to PTZs and using OBS to switch now, so it's a lot easier. But yeah, small church. There's only 23 of us, but through Facebook, there's now 167 looking at the stream, so it's actually very good.
So it sounds like you're quite advanced in where you are with the streaming.
My son is, yeah, Charlie is.
Yeah.
Very helpful. We've just got £2,000 to spend on live streaming. So we're going to get 2 PTZs and a better computer to make everything go faster. But yeah, it's looking good.
Yeah, sounds good. Excellent. Well done for that.
Thank you.
So, Rosemary, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm part of the Methodist leadership team in the Sunderland area. And as we're starting to think about coming back into our church buildings, one of the things we're looking at as a circuit is implementing a digital strategy for the circuit. So we're looking at where we might create sort of online suites, where we might be best investing our money, and really kind of wanting to take a little bit of time to get it right, rather than just kind of leaping in and then 3 months down the line saying to ourselves, oh, I wish we'd done whatever. So this is very much kind of dipping our toe into what might be.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I advise everybody to that. It's the reason we do those sort of questions, really. And we ask those questions of people to see where they are at the moment and where they want to be, and then try and match their budgets and things with what's available, having a wide experience of what is available out there. So it's very wise of you to do that in that sense, and hopefully we can help you in some way, even if it's just advice and what direction to go in. Amanda, sorry, I did jump in there before.
That's okay. I was, as you can see, not in the best place for doing video calls. And I'm also, if you haven't guessed, not very technical, and probably the least technical on our leadership team. But we are a really small church. I love that. I can't remember who said, oh, we're a small church, we've got 120. Yeah, that's about 12 times what we've got. But we found over the past year when we've been in lockdown, we've not been in meeting in person, that our online presence got a lot bigger. So I think live stream is probably quite a long way down the line, but we're looking at being able to sort of like put our services out for the digital sort of congregation that we seem to be connecting to. And it's more sort of like, we have no idea at the moment. We're doing our services on a Sunday morning and our prayer meetings by Skype. So obviously that dies later this year, but there's so much of the digital forum. We don't know. We want to be doing videos and putting them out. There's quite our sort of like, what we don't know is so much bigger than what we do. So any advice is
Okay, great. Let's see how we can help. It's interesting. A lot of people mentioned, and something we found a lot is when people have gone online, they've made that step to go online. It is about how many more people they expected to be watching is actually watching and tuning in. People are at home looking for all sorts of things to do, and people are jumping into different churches. If you belong to a particular church, people have been dipping into seeing what other churches have been doing, which I think is very healthy in a lot of ways. And it is interesting how many more people are tuning into services and things, which is great. It's a positive story that we're hearing all over the place at the moment. Has everybody asked a question? Are we waiting for anybody to give us an overview? Peter.
Can I just put in a quick comment? In connection with what Rosemary said, I have suggested, I'm in Abergavenny in South Wales, and I've suggested to our circuit that in a sense we are in a situation where, just as the early church appointed deacons to serve at tables, we perhaps ought to be appointing digital deacons to look after the technology, because we can't expect our leadership necessarily to be capable in that direction. Their skills may well be in other things. Perhaps we ought, as churches, to be considering appointing specialists to look after this aspect of things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And a lot of churches we know, a lot of churches we work with are doing exactly that, are looking for that. And one of the questions we ask is about a church's team at the moment and their technical ability, and trusting those people to lead on these things as well, to a lot of extent. So that question does lead us in a certain direction with what we would recommend. But yeah, absolutely.
I think the other thing to add to that, Peter, is many years ago, I've always been involved with the technical side of our churches that I've been involved in. But one of the things I did within the Methodist Church is I did the worship leader training course with no intention of ever standing at the front and leading worship, but actually having that part made the technical side a little bit easier, because you knew where people were coming from. You knew why a service was formatted the way it was. So if there's any ever training for your tech guys to do that sort of worship leader thing, I think that's really important. And if you can ever get that through to them, I think it's important that they pray together and they do those things. But yeah, certainly developing a single point of person and team to do that is an important role within that church.
No, I was going to probably move on to the to any specific questions that anybody's got. If we've got a bit of time, we're on just coming up to 6:30, so that gives us a healthy bit of time for anybody to ask any specific questions about what they want. I just thought to open that up.
For ourselves, we're a very, very rural benefice. So any suggestions on web providers and that kind of thing, whether it's better to go on telephone tethering onto the network rather than trying to get dial up down a little copy wire to upload live?
What sort of connection speeds are you getting at the moment? I assume are you on Wi-Fi or hardwired?
None of our churches at the moment has got a Wi-Fi connection.
Right. Okay.
But we know that people in the village, they do struggle sometimes on the Zoom on the Sunday morning just to receive. So we're sort of concerned about broadcasting out and what would be the best technologies to think about using.
Well, certainly phones 4G and coming in 5G are very good options for good speeds usually. I don't know what speed you get on your phone at the moment. And you're sort of looking for 5 to 10 meg upload for decent stream at any one time. It just tends to get expensive with data, unless you can get a decent data package and you know roughly how much you're transmitting, etc. Which sometimes is a matter of trying it and seeing. But it can start to get expensive, as can putting a decent line for internet as well, depending who the providers are. And it's seeing if there's any sort of digital fiber services close to you would be an option. But it is a matter of shopping around and seeing what infrastructure is there rather than who the providers are. Okay. To somebody, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it is a matter of asking around, seeing who's got the best connections locally.
Yeah, it is. And you can do 4G, 5G scans on the different networks. You can go to their websites and see what their signal is best for those areas. So O2 has a different one. EE generally, because EE provide all the internet data for all the emergency services, generally has a very good rural network. And you can get good dongle options as well. Like, I mean, you can get like 4G dongles that then can plug into a network. That's an EE one, for instance. And there are some rural providers who will provide microwave solutions and satellite things, depending on how rural you are. It is a matter of searching and researching really for that area.
Okay.
It's also worth looking into who owns who at the moment as well. So, for instance, EE, as Russ mentioned, is probably the best network around the country, but it is actually owned by BT. So if you go to BT, they can give you some solutions and things, you know. Yeah, there's very few individual providers these days. They all tend to be, there's about 3 major providers who own pretty much everything between them, which is worth knowing.
Roger had his hand up first, Mark. We'll come to you next. Roger, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as far as data is concerned, I use giffgaff, which is a cheaper or alternative version of O2, and I do 80 gig bundle, which I don't ever use, for 20 quid a month, and so I'm never short of data. Sometimes their speeds are a little bit questionable, but you can never tell on a Zoom call whether that's you or the others. So it's difficult to work out who's doing what. But
it is, and that sounds like a really good deal. Yeah. Yeah, there are lots of deals out there available, and you know, I'd be looking at with 5G coming in, which will be so much faster. Everything, that's what I'd be looking at the moment. If data is your best option, and seeing what's out there and what's being rolled out and when and where.
Go on, Mark. Over to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as I mentioned earlier, we tend to stop with YouTube and like we've got about 4 or 5 volunteers now that'll put the YouTube service together. What we found out was our minister was doing a lot of it, and it's only since she started sharing it out you realise how long it takes to put together just a 45-50 minute act of worship. And I think there's a lot of people in our churches that to some ways have been a little bit critical of the online offering that don't actually get the amount of work it takes. The couple of times we have live stream, I haven't done it myself. Again, like a lot of churches, the people that are doing tech are also like some of the worship band and worship leaders. So you're a bit on a rota, so you're not doing it every week. So you might. So it's just the nature of church, isn't it? You end up doing a job once a month or something like that. And certainly with learning something new like live streaming, it takes unless you're doing it regularly, it's quite difficult to do. We're not on fibre broadband at our church, so I think that the couple of times we've done it, it's just been on a wing and a prayer, really. Well, more of a prayer, I suppose.
I think you've made the point though. There's a lot of churches have kind of started recording services first before moving into live streaming. So it's been a good opportunity for them to work out what kind of format works for their church and what people can engage with and kind of get stuff out of an act of worship for. And that transitions can be a challenge because you can't have everything that you had in an edited video going straight into a live service. There's things like playing videos into it, images, graphics, dropping people in from all different areas. So I think one of the things to think about when you start to move to the live, simplify the live, moving away from the record. And don't be afraid, if you're only doing the live stream, don't be afraid to keep it short either. People think they have to do so much, you don't. People lose engagement and people drop off, and yeah, but I think, and certainly that helps with your internet connection if you're uploading a video first. But I think you made a good point there about that transition.
Yeah, and it's the whole thing for us, because we know plenty of people are watching what we're putting online, but it's not always on the Sunday morning. It tends to be follow-up people. So our current thought at the moment is whether is whether we actually record our live services when we're all live together, then maybe edit it during the week or over a couple of days, and then put it out during the week. So, I mean, even though ours is a recorded service on YouTube, we always encourage people, if they can, to sit down at the same time, and then we have a separate Zoom afterwards, because you still get that sense of being together. And certainly people are chatting on Facebook while the service is going on, sometimes during the sermon. But so looking ahead, our thought is we'll keep doing the services we do on YouTube until everybody's meeting together, and then maybe look to record and then put out an edited version of the service. Yes, and there's investment in some kit that we'll need to do, but that's more manageable. And certainly our normal morning service, when we're together, it's probably 90 minutes long. There'll be a significant amount of open worship, often response time. And again, we deliberately kept our online services to try to keep it to 50 minutes max, just to keep people engaged. And what I said before, it's a lot of work to put a 50-minute service together. But we just want, and again, because of it's how to, the people that are serving and the people that have the technical ability. It's almost a big ask to say, okay, come back and get on the Sunday morning worship rota for playing in the band and doing the tech stuff. And by the way, we want you to do a couple of evenings a week doing the online editing as well to get it out. It's really finding that balance. And I think there's also that understanding in terms of the amount of people that maybe aren't it's difficult to know exactly who's watching, isn't it? Or particularly on YouTube, you don't know who's watching. So of the extra people watching, we know there's people from other churches around the country watching ours, but when they go back they're not going to be necessarily coming back to watch us again, I don't think. They might do, some might do. So for us, I think whilst it's a live stream thing and it's useful, we'll probably end up maybe recording and putting and having it on YouTube so people can catch up and listen again to the sermon. We used to record our sermons and put them on our website so people could listen back. I think it's actually much easier for people to listen back things when they're on YouTube these days, even than going to a website. I think we found lots of people that their default thing to find us and find out about is go to YouTube. Quite interestingly.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying there. A few points there is we did two quite large installations in December, one in Salisbury, one in Leeds, and what led them to take that step, the financial outlay really to do it, was that they realised they were spending too much time trying to put a service together on video, trying to video something and put it out there. It's taking up a lot of time. And the advantage of live streaming is it just happens as a service. And yes, you can record that and put it out afterwards. You don't necessarily need to edit it. It's there available. So you're doing it in real time and producing something in real time for people to see potentially later anyway. But the other advantage of it is doing it in such a way that you get that engagement during the service. So if you do it on Facebook, for example, you can invite engagement during that. So to some extent, it is more like actually being in the church and being part of a service. You feel more like you're part of a service because you're engaging on maybe putting comments into Facebook, asking questions, etc. So there is that engagement element there. So there's two things. One was it reduced the amount of time they were spending on it by investing in live streaming. They got some better engagement, and it was recorded and available later for people to watch if they wanted to. So you were ticking a lot of boxes by doing that, which was interesting.
Can I just ask two?
You can, yeah. Sorry.
Just two more questions on that then. And again, before lockdown, we were struggling with volunteers for our tech, doing the audio and the visuals. Is there a live streaming solution basically where you just turn it on and it can run itself, or do you need is there a solution where you don't need somebody monitoring it all the time? And our thought is probably just to start off with just one camera, probably at the back. The second question is, what platform do you use? I'm on a live stream later for Leaders and Worship for somebody, which is on StreamYard. Which is one of the platforms. Is that the one that you guys recommend, or are there other ones that might be helpful for people?
Do you want me to do that first? On the stream, I'll let Russ do some of the more technical ones there. But on the StreamYard one, we like StreamYard. We don't use it at the moment. We are looking into it. We know a lot of people use it very well and use it very effectively. I don't know if you see any of the All We Can broadcasts, which are very good. Yeah. So it can be used very well. We do like it. We just don't use it for anything that we do particularly at the moment, because we tend to want, we tend to put more content into our live streams, which StreamYard possibly isn't best geared to. Sort of words, overlays, lower thirds, all those things that we do for a really professional broadcast. But for getting out there and have interaction, yes, it's very good. Russ?
Yeah, I think spot on. It's a great StreamYard's a communication tool for 2 people, 5 people, 6, 10 people to talk. That's where StreamYard's brilliant, because it's all individual people talking on a webcam. It's like Zoom, but then brought into a broadcast environment. In terms of a single solution to stream that just makes it really easy, yes, there are. There are the 2 ways to think about streaming. You've got hardware and you've got software. Okay, so hardware would be a camera plugged into a mixer, then streaming. Okay, whereas software would be, some people have mentioned it, OBS. So you can plug a camera into a computer, and OBS is a piece of software that will allow you to stream to either to any destination, really, either Facebook, YouTube, or what we would call an RTMP feed, if any of you have heard of that, which is the way that you stream to a service provider. We get a bit more technical at that point. So understanding what your team can do at the moment would determine what piece of software to use. So OBS is a free open source piece of software. If you want to go and spend £800, you can go and buy the equivalent piece of software called Wirecast. So there's very different ways of doing it. It's knowing what your budget is and how you can do it. But there are some really simple bits of hardware and software that work together. We try and recommend hardware. The reason for that is it's more reliable. Out of pure experience, hardware doesn't fall over as much as a computer does when it's running a piece of software. So we would generally have a streaming encoder or a camera that can stream directly to the internet, like a Mevo camera, for instance, which is a single camera which has the streaming encoder built into it. What we'd need to have a further discussion on that one is how we could kind of match that, whether it's, say, Blackmagic do some fantastic streaming kit, and you can find that now, that's just come out, some new bits. But then we use things like Teradek. There's so many different solutions. It's about finding a budget and then finding what works within your team. And I think someone was mentioning before, I think it was Roger was saying, for instance, like the music is a bit of a challenge. Yes, live audio in a live stream is one of the biggest factors you have to think about. Now, there's simple ways you can take a copy from what you've been doing in your church and stream that. There's some bigger questions for individual things. Working backwards, that's the easiest way to do it. What do you want to achieve? Right, how are we going to achieve it? Do we have the kit to do that? Brilliant, we can make that work. If not, what do we need? And then who do we need to teach to do that? So talk a bit further about that. I realised that John's got a question, I think. You've had your hand up for a while. So I want to
sorry, John.
To you there.
All right, no worries. All really valuable insights and information. And I think, as Isabel said before, we're right at the beginning of kind of just looking at this. We've spent a year online. We've done some live interactive in-person services with participants from Zoom as well. So that's about as far as we've got, but it's all stayed within the closed network, as it were, of Zoom and the building. So what we are interested in doing is looking at live streaming an actual meeting happening on us. We happen to meet on a Sunday afternoon, but that's by the way. And so I guess the question I wanted to ask is really about a budget. Is what are the kind of margins? I know that, but how long is a piece of string? But what are your kind of entry level kind of budgets in terms of what we would be expecting to spend bare minimum, and then what can it go up to? I mean, we're 50 or 60 people, so aren't going to have. We haven't got a massive budget, but we are looking at. We would want to do it well so that we're not having to spend again later. So kind of something you mentioned about
Yeah, for something where you're looking at starting on pretty much basics, and we've done like would never recommend one camera because it wouldn't give you any variety within what you're doing. But certainly 2 fixed cameras to start with, and then adding something maybe like a PTZ or 1 fixed camera and a PTZ as an initial thing, and then making sure you've got the right equipment to be able to expand without replacing the equipment. So, you know, a small desk having to replace it with a larger desk. So we'd be looking, we'd probably look at a minimum of about 4.5, 5K to start with, up to about 10K for a decent system. And they're the sort of budget figures we would look at for an install.
Yeah, and I guess that would give you all the kit that you would need. And yeah. Is this fixed install, Peter, or is this something that can be mobile?
The only difference really between a fixed system and a mobile is how you install your cables between the equipment, because everything's movable. So it's what your cable runs are, where they go, how you fix them, etc. So to some extent, that is the only difference between a fixed installation and a mobile installation.
Okay. And is that a price that includes your technical support in terms of
that would include doing the training? Yeah. So, for instance, the system that we put into Leeds was 1 fixed 4K camera and a Bird Dog PTZ. We gave them preview monitor, mixing desk. I'm trying to think because it was December when it happened now. It was essentially a full system, be able to do a really decent stream. And I think that was about 6.5.
We put some additional lighting in for that as well. So
we did lighting, didn't we?
So yeah. they didn't. There was an old traditional church with just stained glass windows, so it was very dark. So there was a bit of additional lighting in there. Plus, the other side of that was we integrated with their current sound system. So they didn't have a digital desk; they had an old analog desk. So all we could do was take a copy of what they were doing in the room and sending that to the stream. That's always the bare minimum that we can do in terms of audio for live stream, is what you listen to in the room is what goes out. Again, we could spend days talking about streaming audio, but without a digital desk to be able to do a separate mix, that's the easiest solution. And that's not overly expensive either, because all we're doing is doing splits and putting it in. It just takes a little bit of time to balance the room versus what signal level goes out on the stream. Again, it's not about us overcomplicating it for you as well. I see someone's answered the questions on the PTZ, pan tilt zoom cameras.
Yeah, sorry, we didn't realise that was a bit rubbish of us to use those terms without explaining what they were. There's a lot behind Russell, actually. There's a little array of 4 of them, as you can see. So this is a brand that we recommend, that we've used a lot recently. We've put a lot of installations in with these Bird Dog cameras, which is an Australian company. They're very affordable. And we love them. They're great cameras. We use them a lot at conferences.
Mark, go on, you've got questions?
Yeah, just coming up. I didn't quite catch that. So in terms of, do you say you need a digital sound desk to run, or is that just a visual desk? So, our place we got an analog mixer for the sound. And we got some sort of digital thing for our visuals projectioning. But would you need a digital sound desk as well, or are we just talking about the?
No, you don't have to. You don't have to. It's what you have ability within the desk you currently have to either copy to send to the stream, or create a separate mix. The problem is when you listen to something in a room, like a church, when you listen to it on your headphones, when you listen at home, it's completely different. You've mixed it for the room, you've mixed it for the space that you're in. So when you then put it on a record feed, the first thing you'll hear is the vocals are really high, is the most common thing. That's generally because you want vocals high within worship, because it's a LED tool that you're using is the vocals. So being able to split that and create a separate mix will give you a much better mix. But again, you've got to have ideally someone to do that. It's a lot easier to do that on a digital desk than a more traditional analog desk. Digital desks are not overly expensive either. If you're going to invest in that, moving that forward as well, you're probably looking at £1,500 upwards to whatever you want to spend for a digital sound desk, different mix. Yeah, it's finding, again, it's technique, it's what your ability is within the church. It might be a case of, yeah, we want to do that, but we can't do it just yet. And you can kind of space things out. You could add streaming to what you currently have, and then long term upgrade your audio, and that would still then fit in with the existing streaming system that you've installed. Because if you chuck everything at once, then you can just imagine the stress of someone coming in on a Sunday morning when people go, oh, what's all this? Flashing buttons, and then they start, the panic kicks in. So we phase it in. And what we generally do is teach you a little bit with the kit that comes in, is give you the basic training how to use that. But there's lots of resources online as well. It's just knowing the little bits. I'm going to come to a question that Peter posted, I think. You said licenses, Peter.
Yes.
That's a vague question. That's a big open thing. So how can we help with the licensing question?
Well, it's a question, I mean, Roger, I think it was, who said, using something that you've taken off a disc. But if you're going to use something that's been recorded, you need a license, don't you? And if you haven't got it, doesn't Facebook suddenly sometimes cut you off?
Well, to be honest, YouTube can cut you off sometimes whether you have or you haven't got it. That sort of thing does happen. But yeah, we find most churches be covered with their standard licenses, what they have in church, and you just add the streaming element to that tick box on the streaming element of the is it CCLI license?
Yeah.
So there is a streaming element to be able to tick on that a little bit more. And we've always found that they've always been incredibly helpful when we've rung them for advice as well. For various, if we're doing a one-off conference for an event and we want to use some licensed material, they're always incredibly helpful. So don't be afraid to phone them and ask advice direct from them, from the licensing authorities.
Oh, well, that's good. Thank you.
And the other thing to look for is Commons license on YouTube. So to see if the artist has ticked the fact that they're happy for people to use material that's on there, and you don't have to then approach them for permission to use their material. It's Creative Commons license, I think it is, on YouTube, and it will be listed on there. It will show you if it's got a Creative Commons license ability to use it.
Right, thank you.
It's not the minefield that you think it is when you go into it. It's a lot simpler than most people think.
The other thing that I know our church is concerned about is safeguarding. Mm-hmm. Accidentally showing people who might not want anybody else to know that they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a matter of getting permission from everybody that they're happy to stream, etc. In the same way as, when somebody mentioned recording this before we started, I asked everybody if anybody got any objections. As simple as that. So it's making sure you've ticked those boxes. In particular, it's something I deal with a lot. I'm a foster carer, so showing children in care online is an absolute no-no, and it can sometimes be done accidentally, and you've just got to approach that with at those times. So it is a matter of making sure everybody in the vicinity of what you're doing knows what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're using it eventually, and making sure you've asked those questions generally.
Mm-hmm.
Creating a safe space for where streaming wouldn't be covered as well. That's the other thing. So there's an area of the church. You don't want to say you can only worship in this area if you don't want to be seen. But it's communication, like Pete says. It's finding a balance between and making sure everyone knows what's going on. Roger, I'm very aware we've got about 5-6 minutes before we get to the end of the hour, so try and do some quick answers if we can.
Yeah, it was just quickly for Peter. The main problem with the CCL licenses is when you try and nick something off of YouTube, especially the worship videos that have been on there for a long while, they don't always have that overall clearance, and they're the ones that tend to need a special additional licensing to put them on.
Yeah.
And
And
the other thing is, as I said, it was about bandwidth really, because if you've got the stuff already on your hard disk, then you don't have to waste your bandwidth trying to stream it live from YouTube at the same time as you're trying to do a Zoom or a Facebook service.
That's an interesting one. We would never recommend trying to play something from YouTube. Always download it. Always have something downloaded. Always. At the times we've run into trouble trying to, in a conference situation, you know, somebody will come up to you and say, "Oh, I want this video playing," and they don't give you the video. They just give you the link to YouTube. And it's a recipe for disaster. You know, when you're trying to do that sort of thing, we would also always recommend it's on a source close to you, not coming across one web and then out through another source.
Preachers do that on a Sunday with regularity.
I'm just going to visit one last point, visit a point, and then I'm going to come to Dan. I see you've got your hand up there for a question. So someone mentioned about YouTube cutting off and Facebook cutting off. Okay, so the way that works is that they have an automatic system that listens to the audio that's going out. If something is blatantly PRS, as in copyrighted, like traditional music, pop music, Facebook has the right to cut you off. And they will normally just turn you off and you have to restart your stream. It generally doesn't happen with worship music that much because it's within a slightly different category and CCLI have those agreements. YouTube works on a strike system, so they won't necessarily cut you off on YouTube, but you might get a strike if you really start to use other people's content without their permission. So what Pete said about making sure if they have Creative Commons license, that's the greatest way to make sure that nothing's going to go wrong. Because it's generally got permissions to use the material they've created, as long as you've got permission from the content or whatever they're using. So don't be afraid to get cut. You're being cut off all the time by people. People kind of get this theory that they're going to get stopped all the time. Don't, because most worship stuff that goes out on a Sunday doesn't get cut off due to copyright issues or dropout issues. It's usually internet connection issues that cause people problems. Again, ask us more about that. We can try and help you with that as well. Dan, what's your question, mate?
It wasn't more a question, just the point of to Roger there is just be careful of when you're downloading from YouTube. I think it's mentioned in the YouTube terms of service that you can't download or stream directly from YouTube without their permission, so just be careful of that.
And there are resources you can buy things from as well, where you're then, by buying them, you've got permission to use them. The easiest way to remember this, if you want to use content, make it. However simple it is, even if it's just a PowerPoint with an image with some music behind, you're more likely to have less challenging issues, and you know that you've made it, it's okay to use. Amanda, you've got your hand up. You're muted and your camera's off, Amanda, so I'll ask you if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Sorry, I've got a light on so I can take notes, and then I blind everybody, so I've left my camera off.
No problem.
If you are live streaming and then God starts doing his stuff and you've got people crying or whatever, what do you do at that point? Where do you, because I've been at sort of like worship events where they start ministering to people and that's live streamed, and actually I felt, when I found out afterwards, I felt actually that was a really vulnerable point that I was in, and yet anybody could have connected to that. What do you suggest for that situation if you're at the point where you're live streaming? Do you have a go-to something in that situation?
Go on, do you want to say that? Or?
Somebody said something earlier about, you know, setting something up and leaving it, and it's one of the arguments for having somebody controlling your images and your cameras and things at any one time, and being able to react to that. And most solutions we would provide would have a holding slide which you can very quickly go to, so you literally cut images without cutting the stream and keeping something up there which is relevant. You know, it could say anything on that holding slide. It might just be the logo and the name of your church or something, but it would mean that you've instantly cut the images without cutting the stream, if you like. So you've still got a relevance on there on the stream you're in. And I agree, that's a difficult situation. You'd have to rely on the people who are controlling your output to react to that in the right way.
And again, that's a church decision as well, isn't it? Because there's a ministry issue there of what you want to export on the stream, and having an understanding with the church leadership of what you want to do in terms of if it gets to that point. But Pete's right. What we would normally do in that environment is go to some sort of holding slide and either some music. If we knew we were going to come back, if it was an extended time of worship, you kind of call the point where you might want to stop it. But if you knew you were going to come back to a host and say something at the end or wrap up with a prayer, if it gets to that point, having something prepared to hold on is great. But again, it's where the technical team has to work with leadership and worship leaders and that sort of thing to make sure that the right thing is portrayed externally as well. Over time, that becomes a really good understanding, and you don't have to ask the question every time. So yeah, again, that's just time that takes there. I hope that helps, Amanda.
Yes, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. And thank you for this session, because I probably won't speak again.
You're welcome. It is just after 7. So I think we'll generally wrap up the session, but Russell and I will stay online after we've done that for a while. If anybody's got any other questions to ask, we're happy to stay to do that. Russell.
So, yeah, just a couple of things really. The reason we did these sessions was we wanted to make some tools and resources available for people, because we get a lot of questions from, like tonight, of such a wide ranging. We want to continue these moving forward. We want to try and have more meetings, we get more people involved. Part of that is also down to you kind of finding out more information about yourselves and how we can help. We are building a number of resources at the moment where we can kind of help you. We're working on, I'm just going to spotlight this image for a second. So we're working on some graphics and things like that, can try and help work out the different stages of live streaming that we can get to kind of explain different areas and different bits of equipment. And then this can then lead into further questions about, well, what would you suggest for this sort of thing? So we'll send a copy of this out for you so that you can see that coming up. So what I'd also like to say to you as well, we'll send an email out after tonight to everyone who's attended. But we'd like to know what topics would be helpful for you, so we can kind of plan those a little bit more, get a bit more detail, a bit more meat on the bone. What specific interest of equipment that you might be interested for your church, let us know, respond to the email, let us know. What major challenges or little challenges you had. And if there are any organisations that you've seen doing worship online that you found really useful and really helpful, let us know, and we can try and either, I might probably already know who they are, and be able to incorporate them into our future meetings as well. But basically we want to make this available to everyone who can use it. And again, I think just utilise an email. We'll send out our email afterwards as well. Do drop us a question if you've got any. Like I say, the meeting will officially end now, but we'll stay on for a little bit longer to have open more discussion. But I just wanted to say thank you for all coming. It's really, really encouraging to see so many people here today as well, who've got streaming questions and things like that.
Well, thank you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.